70,000 tips that we had to go through all of them. And it took a lot of time and effort, but 69,999 of them weren't the one we were looking for. So once we got the one we were looking for, the team did a great job of collecting the facts and the evidence and presenting it to Nick and his team, and the rest is history.
And it's a question that many of us have heard and get, so I'll ask you, Nick. Do you believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, they have the right guy, that he was found guilty of the double murder? Do you believe you had the right guy, and why?
Yes, absolutely.
The evidence is there. He placed himself on the bridge. We're able to show that he is the man on the bridge. He's the last person that had contact with the girls. We're able to tie him to the crime scene, and then you have his confessions. And so I believe that he is the right guy. I believe the jury came down with the correct verdict, and he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
And the bullet. Talk about the bullet and the striations. I was there that day in court, and it was very technical for me, but I've heard it is, and I believe, almost like a fingerprint, the unspent bullet of striations in the bullet.
That's the way it was explained to me, that it's a fingerprint and they can match the bullet to a gun. I believe in the science. I sat through with the lab tech for many hours, and we talked and discussed how they get to that determination that the bullet matches the gun. And so I believe in the science, and so I believe that the bullet found there at the crime scene came from the gun that was owned by Richard Allen.
And if you could describe Delphi for those many people who haven't been, it is kind of like a quaint town like Pleasantville, and you're third generation.
Sure. Carroll County as a whole is only 20,000 people. A very rural community, a lot of farmers, blue-collar workers. Delphi, I'm not sure the population of Delphi, probably around 1,000 people in total in the city limits. Just a very small town, kind of Leave It to Beaver type of town, where everybody left their doors unlocked, left the keys in their vehicles, and just kind of that quintessential, small town. And where we kind of know everybody. It's not uncommon if somebody comes in the restaurant and we don't know them, that person probably is not from there or just moved there. It's just a very, very small town.
And did you go to the bridge in high school? Or?
We did. It's been something that generations of teenagers have done, kind of a rite of passage. You would cross the bridge to kind of test your nerve, I guess, yeah, and you would walk across it. We'd take pictures off of it. We would sit on the platforms and hang our feet off and take pictures. It was just something that the kids in our area have done since I was a kid.
And did you both know, once you found out where this took place, that it had to be a local? Because it's difficult to kind of find your way and figure out where the bridge is.
I think there's a lot of theories out there. Maybe it was a drifter. But I think what stuck in my mind, a lot of the team's mind, was the way he walked across that bridge. It wasn't the first time that he'd been there. And I worked Carroll County for years, patrolled, and I never knew that bridge was there. I didn't grow up there, but I think most people that was heavily involved in the investigation thought it had to be somebody that's been out there before.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It had to be somebody from our community or somebody that knew a person in our community and was taken out to the bridge, because it's not something that's easy to find. And Jerry's right, the way he was walking across, you could tell it's someone that had been across that bridge before. It's not their first time, because it is difficult to walk across it just because of the layout of the bridge.
Yeah, and the height of it.
Sure.
Let's talk about once Richard Allen was in custody and the interrogation video that was played in court, if you will, and how important that was. And I thought you did an excellent job, and it's key to point this out, because you were calm and you got him to say certain things or just respond to you.
I was calm
towards the beginning.
Towards the beginning, and that's how I start all my interviews. I try to give them the respect. I don't start amping up that until they do. But we met and we talked about the strategy. He'd already been interviewed technically twice. The third time, we just wanted to get some questions answered of, have you ever loaned your gun out? I built a little rapport with him. Have you ever loaned anything out? And then there came a time when we wanted him to take a polygraph. That's all been redacted out, right? So what everybody sees is just me being nice, and then all of a sudden I start yelling and screaming. But there was more to it. I asked him to take a polygraph. He said, no, I'm not taking a polygraph. I'm not helping you guys anymore. I asked his wife if she would take a polygraph, and she said, yeah, I didn't do anything wrong. And I said, well, if you were innocent and I was asking you to take a polygraph, would you take a polygraph? And then that made him angry, and he started raising his voice and cussing at me, and then I returned that same enthusiasm to him. So I'm really not like that.
Well, the trial was a month long, so many exhibits, so many witnesses on the stand, your opening statements, your closing. I wish everyone could have seen that. I could tell the preparation level and what it meant to you to represent Abby and Libby, Nick.
Sure. I mean, it's something that I came in the office on January 1st of 2018, and the investigation, we were about a year into the investigation at that point. And so, you know, I lived it for 5 years before we made an arrest, and then for an additional 2 years preparing for trial and just awaiting trial. And so it's not something that you do at work and then you leave at work. It's just something you carry with you. And, you know, during the 5-year investigation, we would have meetings at least weekly, sometimes more often. I would get daily updates about tips that had come in or someone they had talked to or whatever the case may be. And so it's just something that was every part of my everyday life for 5 years. And so it's hard not to get emotionally involved in it or emotionally attached to it. And then when we got the arrest, you had another 2 years of trial preparation. And with that trial preparation came a whole nother box of problems. You know, dealing with the defense and answering some of these questions from the defense and just answering their motions and all those kind of things. It just became a whole nother can of worms.
Well, now that you bring it up,
deal with.
How did you get through the toxicity? Because it's unlike anything I've ever seen in terms of the anger and the vitriol. And I do want to point out what the superintendent, Doug Carter, did say right after the sentencing. There was a press conference and you saw clips of it, and he just said, where he said, tone down the rhetoric. What he also said was this wasn't a group think, meaning we disagreed. He even mentioned having an argument with Tope Lesenby and the back and forth with you, Jerry. So it was open to discussion, of course.
Oh, absolutely. We learned a lot from this investigation, but we're not closed-minded. We're open-minded. We had a lot of people involved, and I've never worked with a prosecutor that's worked as hard as Nick and his team. And, you know, he was brought in late, but it was a blessing in disguise, I think, having him come on. But, you know, I lived it for 8 years, and I have to say, thanks to my family. So
it's been rough for you. The superintendent. Jerry's wife was in the front row. The superintendent mentioned how you gave up your life. I remember at that presser, he said, very angry, Jerry Holman is not a liar, that he gave up years of his life, meaning dedicated your life to this, and became close to Mike and Becky, Anna, the entire family, Tara, Amanda, Kelsey. It's a relationship you'll have forever. Yeah,
the victims' families were great. They're very supportive. They had every opportunity to lose faith in us, but they knew that we weren't going to give up. And the communication with them was just phenomenal. You know, couldn't ask Mike Patty wanted to be a special deputy so he could come out and help us. But that's, you know, now that I have 8 grandkids, that's exactly how I would have been if I was in his shoes. I've tried multiple times to think, what would I do if I was in that situation? And you just can't do it. So you just got to refocus and say, okay, well, I'm in this situation and this is what we're going to do. We're not going to give up. We're going to follow the facts and the evidence. And when we get the right guy, we're going to present it to the prosecutor. And that's what we did.
It almost felt like 2 different worlds, the world of what I was seeing inside the courtroom with the evidence and what I was hearing and seeing, and then kind of the negativity online. And it's not just disagreement. It's not like, oh, are we sure about X, Y, and Z? It was just constant hate. And I'm hoping, I think, that it's just a small amount of people that keep talking over and over and over again. When I was talking to Nick about coming here, and he talked about the file. You have a file of people to look out for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, this is the first case that I've ever dealt with that was nationally publicized and that has that on top of the social media kind of genre behind it. And so it was very new to me. I'd never dealt with anything like this. And you're right, I do think the negative people were a small portion of it, but they had a very loud voice, at least in my bubble, in our world that we dealt with. And, you know, it's something that we would talk about at the weekly meetings. And Jerry's right. we had a good support group around us with my co-counsel between Stacy
They were
Diener
excellent.
and James Luttrell, but also with Jerry and Tony Liggett and the family. We all kind of just used each other to support each other because there was a lot of negative rhetoric out there that was just simply not true. There was no fact checking, and it would just be, okay, what can we say that's going to get more clicks in the moment? How much can we sensationalize this to get people's attention? And whether it was true or not, they would just say it. There was no moral compass to see if it was correct or not, or even to back it up with any facts. It would just be, what can I say that is most hurtful because I know that is going to get more people to my website or my podcast or my YouTube channel.
And do you think the fact that the investigation was closed off, which I understand, you don't want to disrupt the integrity of the investigation, do you think it perpetuated that? Meaning, I remember the day there was an announcement, like finally an arrest, and Carter kind of prefaced it and said, you're not going to like what Nick has to say coming up here. And you said, this will be sealed, the probable cause affidavit. And I'm in the newsroom going, oh no, because that just fueled the flames of...
Sure. I got a lot of negative comments about that, and I knew I was going to, but my main concern was to make sure that the defendant had a fair trial and also that the state. And I firmly believe in FOIA, and I firmly believe in everyone's right to have access to public records, but not to the point where it compromises the integrity of a case. That is my sticking point. And if it means the public has to wait longer to get that information, then so be it. The most important thing to me in my world is to make sure that the state and the defendant have a fair trial in the courtroom. And I have to just put aside those public requests and those public wants because those aren't most important to me in that moment. It's making sure that everything that happens in the courtroom is fair and equal.
And you did say that it was sealed because at that particular time you weren't sure if there, in your words, other actors, because at that time you didn't know.
Yeah, we didn't have any evidence that there were any other actors, but it's always difficult for law enforcement and me specifically to close the doors on all avenues. I really don't like to be closed-minded or have blinders on. We didn't know if someone else may have been with the defendant or someone else may have set up the meeting, or we just didn't know if there was something else out there. And to close the door on that just didn't make me feel right. And so I wanted to keep that open just in case we found additional evidence or the defendant wanted to come talk to us. No, we've never found anything that showed anybody else was involved except Richard Allen.
I also remember you saying there were days, and this was the announcement, I believe it was October 31st, 2022, that you'll remember forever. The day your kids are born, the day you buy your first house, and you said the day that Abby and Libby, of course, went missing, and the day that you had the probable cause that was enough to make an arrest. And we were talking yesterday, and I said, there was a probable cause with Ron Logan. But you said the investigation, of course, went on, and they looked into other people, but never enough for an arrest. No one could ever be tied to the crime scene,
Sure,
except the man who was found guilty.
We interviewed thousands of people and served hundreds of search warrants or got consent to searches, and we left no stone unturned. And the theory of, we framed this guy, I mean, we looked at a lot of people that personally I would have, they were bad people.
Right.
But the evidence did not lead us to get probable cause for an arrest, other than Richard Allen.
We have different burdens of proof in the legal world, and one of them is probable cause. And you have to have probable cause to make an arrest. You also have to have probable cause to have a judge issue a search warrant for property or for a phone or for a vehicle. But they're different in the sense when you're looking for probable cause for a search warrant, you're telling the judge, I believe there's evidence of a crime in this location, whether it be the phone, the house, a vehicle. And so that probable cause outlines the evidence that you've collected to establish why you think there's additional evidence in this place. In drug dealing cases, we always grab the phone and we search it because oftentimes drug dealers use their phone to contact their supplier, contact their buyers. And through training and experience, we know that that is typical. And so we get a probable cause for a search warrant to search that phone. That's different than probable cause, at least in my mind, for an arrest. For probable cause and arrest, you have to lay out the evidence that you have that this person committed the crime, how they're tied to the crime scene, how they're tied to the victims, whatever the case may be, for an arrest. So they're both probable cause, but they're different avenues and they're different. So because you have probable cause for a search warrant for somebody's house or phone or car does not mean you have probable cause to arrest them for a crime. They're just different. And so we did several probable causes for search warrants for various things, for hundreds of people. That is a tactic we use to investigate crimes. I would venture to say it's a tactic that the whole world uses to investigate crimes.
Yeah.
But that is different than probable cause for an arrest. The only probable cause we had for an arrest was for Richard Allen.
And it was the first time I was at a jury selection, and I was there, and I remember you saying, which is key, and it pertains to being at CrimeCon with all the new discoveries in genealogy and DNA. And you said, part of your questions was, do you think it's going to be like the TV shows, where you absolutely have to have that ties the person to it?
Sure, we're in a culture of the CSI effect, I call it, and there are multiple variations of the CSI show, and I would hope that everybody's seen at least one version of that show. But in that show, they have everything fits in a nice little package with a bow, right? They have fingerprints and DNA at the scene, and they have the crime on video a lot of times, and that's just not real world. There are a lot of times we have a crime where we don't have DNA, we don't have fingerprints. DNA is a lot harder to transfer to a point where you can get a good sample to establish a profile than what they show on TV. And so it's very, very rare, at least in my area of Indiana, that we have DNA tying a person to the scene. Much of our evidence is based on witness testimony, confessions from the defendant, physical evidence we find there besides DNA. And so it's just not, I always ask the jury, if you're expecting the state to have a nice little package with a bow on it like they do on TV, that's not reality. And if you have that expectation, you may not be the right juror for this case. You may be an appropriate juror for another kind of case, whether it be a civil case or some other kind of case. And so I always try to educate the jury that, what you see on TV is not what you see in reality. We're also not going to have the crime, catch the killer, and have the trial all in an hour. It's just not going to happen. And so you just have to tell the jury that don't expect it to be like CSI, because it's just not.
And in every court case, as you know.
And because we're where we're at, there's a wonderful podcast called The Detectives.
Oh, and, yes.
I had to give them a plug.
Yes.
They talk about reality versus Hollywood, and they explain everything that Nick just said.
Who's in it? You can introduce the stars.
Yeah, it's great. So,
who's in it? She said.
What's that?
Who's the star? If you could stand up.
Who's this? Who is it?
Yeah.
I can't say who it is.
Well,
it's The Detectives. Steve and Dave.
Yeah.
The Detectives. Steve and Dave. You can. Whatever. I don't listen to podcasts, but I did listen to theirs. Probably get booed off the stage here now, but I did listen to some of theirs, and it's pretty good. So, but yeah, they do a good job of explaining exactly what Nick did. Nick does a great job of explaining things too. He's pretty much made me a apprentice attorney, I think.
Well, I was going to mention the relationship the two of you have. You could tell you're very close, and I know that you said. He was so prepared in giving you tips, and they were talking about yesterday how Jerry would turn on the stand or move in your chair.
There's a couple people reminded me of that. Good thing these don't swivel, but Nick and I do have a great relationship, but I do have to clear the air. I have never kissed Nick McClellan. Was
that a rumor?
There was a media saying, I don't know who said it, but the truth is,
when the verdict came down?
Yes.
I said, Nick, I'm so happy after the verdict came out. I'm so happy I could kiss you. And he said, don't. And no means no. So I gave him a hug. And we moved on.
That's right. Jerry and I are very close. When you're forced to be in a room together for several hours on end, it's just we became more brothers, and we would talk to each other like brothers. And so he's right. The first time he was on the stand, our chair in our courtroom, the witness chair, it's a very old courtroom. It's very beautiful, but it's very old, and the furniture in it is probably just as old as the courtroom. But the chair swivels and it kind of rocks. And He did fine for about the first 10 minutes of me questioning him, and then he started to kind of swivel like this. And by the time the defense got to him, I mean, it was distracting. And so we had a little chat after his first time testifying. I said,
in every trial, there's highs and lows, and one day may feel like a win, and one day may feel like a loss.
Sure.
Did you feel that during the trial?
You always feel lulls.
Yeah.
Again, this is the longest trial I've ever done. I've done a 2-week trial. I've done a 2.5-week trial. This is the first one I've done that was a month, and this is the first one I've done with the amount of evidence that there was to present to the jury. And there's just lulls in that, and one of the biggest hurdles we had to come up with as a team between Stacey Diener, James Luttrell, and I is the order of witnesses, and how are we going to keep the jury, how are we going to keep their attention and engaged in the evidence? Because when you get to DNA evidence, ballistic evidence, a lot of it is scientific material and a lot of it is kind of dry. And you have to educate the jury, this is what we're talking about, and then explain the evidence we have. And so there are lulls in there in the trial. For me personally, I'm always going through the trial and saying, okay, did that hit the jury as hard as it hit me when I read that piece of evidence? Did that influence them as much as it influenced me? There was a lot of talk about the first interview with the defendant and when his wife was brought in. The second interview when his wife was brought in and the reaction that she had to him. That hit me different than it hit other people. And so you're always wondering, how does this evidence affect the jury and what are they thinking?
I know you never really know exactly their thoughts, but I thought, which was so interesting and I thought so helpful, was that they were able to ask questions. So did you feel like that kind of gave you an indication?
Yeah, that's a benefit we have in Indiana. I'm not familiar with other states, whether they allow that or not, but in Indiana, we allow the jurors to ask questions. So after each witness, the jury can ask questions, and then those questions, they're put in writing, they're given to the judge. The judge will have a sidebar with the attorneys and say, okay, do you object or consent to these questions? If an attorney objects, then we have argument outside the presence of the jury. If not, the judge will ask the questions of the witness, and the witness will answer. In Indiana, it's a good gauge for me to say, okay, what are the jury focusing on? What are they, or where did we maybe not hit the mark? If they have questions about like the ballistics and the striations, if they have questions about that, okay, maybe we need to go a little bit more into that. After the juror questions are asked, the defense and the state then have additional opportunity to ask the witness questions so you can follow up on the juror questions. I think it does a couple things. I think it shows the juror that you're listening to what they're asking and allows you to react to that, but it also allows you to clean up something you may have missed. So the juror questions to me are hugely important.
That's an excellent point. And I think when a trial is long and it drags on, some people can forget what it really is about, which was Abby and Libby. I know last night we went through kind of your preparation for the trial and the slides, and you do, if they could show the last picture of Abby and Libby, there it is on Snapchat.
Not the very last picture, but this is the picture of Abby and Libby on the way to the trails, and it's got some kind of key points on there. It's February 13th of 2017. We were able to get this from Libby's phone, and she posted this to Snapchat. The phone is really a big piece of evidence. It was able, like I said, to give us those GPS markers and those kind of things. And we talk about, this is where, I don't have a laser pointer, but the bridge is actually in the lower right-hand corner of this map. And it's.
I asked you, why didn't you want the jurors to go there? And you brought up a great point of, you didn't know about the terrain in terms of their safety.
The terrain's pretty treacherous where that's at. I was worried about someone tampering with the jury on the way there, on the way back, or while they were out there. I just didn't think the benefits of having them visit the scene outweighed the risks. And so I objected to it. I didn't think it was a good idea. And so the jurors didn't go out there. We had enough pictures of the area and of the crime scene that I thought we could do just as good a job by showing the pictures and the things that we had. But this is a map we used that kind of showed the overall trail system. And again, I don't have a pointer and it's hard to see, but you can see the bridge is within the wooded area, and it's just a very rural area. And so
I thought that you were able to show that through the pictures, since it was, the jurors were not from Delphi, but they were brought in, so the trial was. That was a hurdle
we had to get over. The probable cause makes a lot more sense once you know the layout of the terrain and the area. And if you have jurors from Delphi, you can tell anybody in Carroll County the High Bridge, and they're going to know where it's at, the terrain, the landscape. They're going to know all of that because it's something that everybody in our county knows. We had to explain that to people who had never been to Carroll County before. And so it was a hurdle in itself just to explain to them, this is where this happened, and this is a remote area, and it's in the middle of the woods, and there's not good cell phone reception, and all these kind of things. We had to educate them about that as well.
And Jerry, it took almost 6 years. Were there times that you thought, oh my gosh, could this go unsolved? Were there moments?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the day we were down there at the bottom of the hill, the very first day, my mindset was we're going to solve this by the end of the week, because we do that a lot. But then after week 2 and 6 months and then a year and then 3 years, but the mindset was we're not going to give up. We're not going to quit on Abby and Libby and their families. And we had to sacrifice a lot. We went through COVID. We went through a lot of things. A lot of tragic events happened within our departments. We had 2 Carroll County deputies die on the line of duty. We had a state trooper die on the line of duty. We had, all of us had to put that aside and continue to focus on it. So, it goes through your mind, but our mindset was we're not going to give up. It's not a cold case because we kept getting information. And thanks to the family for coming to CrimeCon and going to festivals and continuing to put the story out there, we were able to continue getting information, good, leads to follow up on. But yeah, it definitely goes through your mind, but we don't quit.
And soon I'll open it up to questions, but I get this question the most. If you could clear up the tip that Dan Doolin got and what happened with that?
Well, Dan Doolin took the tip, I think it was on February 18th or maybe 19th of 2017. 17th, okay. And it was processed, and somewhere along the line, nobody knows who, somebody wrote lead cleared on the tip. It was filed under Richard Allen Whiteman, but that really doesn't matter. The name it was filed under doesn't matter, right? It's just in a different drawer within the drawers. The real problem is somebody wrote on it lead cleared. Don't know who wrote that, don't know when it happened, but then it got tucked away in the cleared leads section. And in sometime, I think in 2020, probably 2021, we decided as a team, okay, we need to go back to the beginning. Mm-hmm. Let's recheck everything, because we all believed it was somebody local or somebody that visited Carroll County often. And so we always thought that we probably have interviewed the person already and we just missed something. And so we decided to go all the way back to the beginning, and Kathy Shank was heavily involved in that. And we did that. We went back to the beginning and looked at every tip again. And when we got to that tip, she said, look, I'm familiar with Kathy Shank. I'm familiar with this case enough that I know we haven't followed up with this guy. And he puts himself on the bridge at the time the girls went missing. We got to talk to this guy. And that's kind of what got the ball rolling.
And for those who don't know, Kathy Shank was going through the files, I believe. You were moving from one building to another.
We had moved several times just because of space allocation. We were at the city building, they did some remodeling, we moved to another building, and then we finally moved to our last location. And in the process, stuff had just been thrown in boxes, some of stuff.
Yeah.
And she would go through and organize those boxes when she had time, and that's what she was doing. She was going through these various files, organizing them, verifying them, making sure we had followed up on them, and then she found that tip sheet.
Yeah, saying, wait a minute.
She did that on multiple people. She would bring us tips, and we'd go back, and sometimes we had found that maybe we didn't get the report up there and copied, or maybe some people didn't do reports, so we'd go back and re-interview people.
Yeah.
She did that all the time for years.
Yeah.
And then, so it's important. Everybody's like, oh, lost tip. It wasn't lost. It was there. It was just mislabeled.
And going back to the trial, did you think he would take the stand, Richard Allen?
I was a defense attorney for a long time before I was prosecutor. It's always a difficult decision to decide whether or not to have your client testify.
Were you ready if he did?
Absolutely. I had expected that he might, and so the last thing you want to do is not prepare and go in there and then he testifies. So I was prepared. I had a list of questions I was going to ask him. They were tough questions. They were going to be tough questions. He was going to have to explain to the jury some of these things that we had found, but he decided not to take the stand, and that's his absolute right. Every defendant has a Fifth Amendment right not to take the stand, and he decided not to, and that was his decision.
And for most of your trials, what is the relationship between the prosecutor and defense attorneys, and is this vastly different?
So I am a prosecutor in a very small county. It's only me and a chief deputy prosecutor, and there's only 2 prosecutors in the county that prosecute all the criminal cases that come through that county. We also have a finite set of defense attorneys. I think right now there's maybe 4 or 5 defense attorneys in the county, and you deal with those defense attorneys on a daily, Monday through Friday daily basis, and you deal with them on several cases. And so it's not advantageous to be confrontational with each other every day because you have so many cases to work through. If you did that, you wouldn't get anything done. And so there's a mutual respect between defense attorneys and prosecutors in the small communities. I can't comment on the bigger cities like Denver or Indianapolis or those kind of bigger cities, so I don't really know about that. But in our small community, when you have to work with somebody every day, it's just not a good thing to be at each other's throat all the time. This was vastly different. This was confrontational from the very first hearing after we had a meeting in judges' chambers, and the defense went out and talked to the press after they said they weren't going to. And so from that point on, it just became vastly different, and it became confrontational. Everybody that's followed the case has seen it within the motions, both filed by me and by the defense, and the responses to the defense motions that I filed. I would try to stay above the fray, but it's difficult sometimes not to get a little bit chippy when the defense is accusing you and your team of being evil and corrupt and all these kind of things, when you know it's not true. And so this was a new experience that I had had. I'd been confrontational with attorneys, and I fully expect a defense attorney to be confrontational with me in the courtroom, to zealously advocate for their client. I expect that. If you didn't do that, I would have questions. And so I expect that, but I expect it to be professional, and I expect it to stop once we get to the courtroom door and leave. And it just didn't happen that way here. It just became kind of mudslinging, and it was just something I had never experienced with any other case, on the defense or the prosecution side.
Absolutely, I saw it. And Jerry, you followed the gag order. That was important to the investigation, and Superintendent Carter mentioned that after the sentencing, saying, we followed the gag order, they did not. What were your thoughts on the, I believe it was kind of disguised as a Frank's memo, but I think it was breaking the gag order with the odious theory. That was still investigated by you both.
Yeah, I mean, apparently the defense attorneys can say whatever they want, and we're not supposed to retaliate, but we investigated the ritualistic killing theory. All the people that the defense team wrongfully accused, we thoroughly investigated them. We had a 3-day hearing where they attempted to say, we want to use this third-party defense, and they couldn't. They couldn't even put half the people they wrongfully accused in Delphi. And we tried. I mean, we followed up on every tip very thoroughly, documented it. Sometimes we go back a couple years later and re-interview people, and there was just no evidence indicating that. And the whole blood on the tree, everybody's like, oh, somebody intentionally put that. No, our crime scene investigators told us it was blood transfer the first day. And it was not smear or anything like that. There's some blood spatter on the lower part of the tree, which they don't talk about that. But, you know, Pat Cicero, the blood spatter expert, took his own blood and did experiments, and it was the back of Libby's hand that she was trying to stop the bleeding from her neck, fell into the tree, and that caused that upside down L. But the tent on the tree and all that, so people jumped on that and was like, no, that's not true. And the sticks were laid on the left side of the girls. Well, what's on the left side? The driveway to Weber's house. Yeah. And so he's trying to hide them. And it was clear to us, the evidence clearly indicated that it was not. But we reached out to professors, we reached out to other people, we had multiple investigators look into it, and there was just no evidence proving that was a theory.
Hearing him on the phone with his wife and mother was so, I thought, to hear that. He did not sound like he was out of sound mind. I do want to allow time for questions, but when you bring up Libby, that was for the families to be there every single day and hear that stuff. If you could, Nick, end with what you did in your closing argument in terms of talking about Abby and Libby and how essentially what they did.
Sure. I really enjoy doing closing statements. It's an opportunity to summarize the evidence that you've presented at trial. And in Indiana, the state of Indiana will get to make a closing statement. The defense then gets to make a closing statement, and then I get to do what they call a rebuttal statement. I don't know if they do that in other states. I don't know if they do that here or not, but that's the way it is in Indiana. And so the first closing statement I always use as a way to review all the evidence, and that became hugely important in this case because you're talking about evidence that we presented over a 3.5-week period. And so it was an opportunity for me to summarize what I think are the pillars of our case. That Richard Allen's bridge guy, that his bullets at the scene, and the confessions. Those were kind of the 3 pillars that we had of our case. And so it's an opportunity for me to emphasize the importance of those 3 pillars. Then the defense gets to make their closing, and then I get to talk to the jury one last time. And I wanted to make sure that last time I talked to the jury that the focus is taken off of Richard Allen and put back on the girls. It was important to me for the jury to remember we had talked a lot about him being confined in solitary confinement and how, the defense said that was torture and that was bad, and the defense painted him as the victim. I wanted to make sure that we refocused and made sure the jury knew that Abby and Libby were the victims, not Richard Allen. And I wanted to...
I know they were both interested in forensics and crime solving, and Nick said it so poignantly, saying they did solve their own crime.
Yeah. It was something that Becky had told us. I can't remember if it was in trial prep or just through talking with her, that Libby wanted to do something in the criminal justice world and wanted to help solve crimes for other people. And so that kind of struck me as, that's ironic that she is the one that helped solve her own crime. And so I thought it was important just to show the jury that phone video and the evidence on the phone that Libby was able to collect and that Abby was able to hide, that if we didn't have that, I'm not saying we would never solve the crime, but our starting point would be way further than what it was. With that video, we were able to have a place of where the crime occurred. We had what I like to call anchors in time. Mm-hmm. We knew the video was taken at 2:13. That's an anchor. We know the phone stopped moving at 2:32. Mm-hmm. Now we have anchors or bumpers within which the crime occurred. That is a huge leap. You're not looking at a 24-hour period. You're looking at a 14, 15, 35-minute period. It just narrows it down, and without that, our starting point would have been further away than we were at. So it's just a huge piece of evidence, and for them to be able to, Libby to take that video. I mean, imagine the fear that you have. A strange man is following your best friend across the bridge, and you can hear the fear in the voice in the video from Abby. To have the wherewithal to pull your phone out and to hide it in a way that he doesn't immediately see it or see that you're videoing it. And then to put it in your pocket and then, for it to be hidden by Abby, for us to be able to find it. It's huge.
And it's time now for questions. If you want to come up to the mic and just say your name and ask the question.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm over here. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you sacrificed and for being really class acts throughout the entire process that we all watched you go through.
Thank you.
I remember at one point prior to trial, during maybe some pre-trial hearings, that there was discussion about a lot of video and audio that was either overwritten in the beginning of the investigation. Can you shed light on that, and how did you handle that?
I can talk about it real
Okay,
quick.
go ahead.
So we had some technical difficulties, but we make mistakes all the time, and we do our best to correct those mistakes. So what we did was we went back, tried to identify which videos were overwritten, and if there was a written report that memorialized the interview, and we were good with that, then we took that and used that. If not, we would try to track them down and re-interview them. And we did that with a majority of the people and some of them were just, the audio didn't work, the video worked, but we did our best to correct that mistake. And we do that all the time. Like I said, we make mistakes all the time, but we go back.
Well, I don't think you
we
make
identify.
mistakes all the time. I don't want to go down that road, but
I do.
I think this happened in 2017, so I wasn't the prosecutor then. I was a defense attorney then, actually. But from what I know, when the crime occurred, there were multiple people from multiple different agencies that wanted to come in and help. Everybody wanted to do what they could to help. This really rocked our community, and I think it rocked surrounding communities. I think if you talk to prosecutors and members of communities surrounding ours, I think it really hit home with them too. And so we had people from agencies that had never been in our community before using equipment that they'd never used before. And there was nobody in the beginning said, okay, this is how you use the equipment in this area, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. And so I think that is part of it too, that you just had a lot of unfamiliar people working equipment, but you also had so much information coming in, tips. In the beginning, tips were coming in, thousands by the day.
And Jerry, I heard you say, like, technology. It works sometimes.
It works.
I want to get to the next question.
Well, thank you for catching him. This crime was so heinous, it's hard to believe it was his first time killing somebody. Is he being looked at for other crimes that may have happened in the area?
We don't have any evidence of that, and it's really not as unusual as you think for somebody to commit a brutal murder and then have no criminal history. It just happened in Idaho, right? No criminal history at all. And so it's not as uncommon as we think. It's weird for us to think that because we're normal people, right? And doing something that heinous would rock and affect us in a way that is abnormal. And so it's hard for us as normal people, I'll say, to quantify that, okay, someone who has no criminal history, no history of using drugs can just go out and do this. But it happens more often than you think.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, can you please shed some light on how you came to the second composite sketch, and if that in any way sidelined perhaps the investigation when it appears that Richard Allen may have actually appeared more like what was put forth in that first sketch?
I wasn't the prosecutor when the sketches were done, unfortunately. But
No.
Yeah, we talked about, the first sketch was out there before I became prosecutor, so it was already out there. The second sketch, we were kind of an open team for any ideas. Okay, what can we do next? We would meet weekly. What are we going to tackle this week? What leads are we following up on? And we were advised by, I can't remember who, we advised that,
Carter, I think.
Was it Carter? That we should release the second sketch. It may generate some additional tips.
I'm sorry,
so that's what we did.
Yeah.
Whether or not it derailed anything, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the big derailment in my mind is that on the tip for Richard Allen, it was lead cleared. I don't think it was the sketches or anything. Had we had that and followed up with him back in 2017 and perhaps grabbed his phone, this might have been a more open and shut case because we might have had more evidence.
Yeah, with Carter, he said, remember, it's not a photograph. That's what I was going to say.
Sure.
And if you're younger, you may think he looked older, I remember.
Yeah, and the thing about sketches is it's the depiction of that person. Eyewitnesses that aren't thinking that they're seeing somebody that committed a crime are going to give you different descriptions. So we just wanted to make sure. We believe that's the same guy. We know for a fact that they saw the same guy. It's just the way they depict
And interpret it. Okay. You're
So-
Go ahead.
Hi. I also just wanted to add, I think it's very admirable, the sacrifice that you've made for your family and your communities as well. I just had a quick question. So as a consumer of this case, all across the board, it seems to be there's about 5 big pillars of evidence that go against Richard Allen. That would be him, the bullet, bridge guy video, the blue jeans, and him owning a Carhartt as well, putting himself at the bridge, and the jailhouse confessions as well. Are there any other, as viewers, any other details of the case, especially when it comes to forensic evidence, that we're missing, or would you say those are the big 5 pillars that point the finger at Richard?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think those are the big points. What we put out in the trial is what we thought were the pillars of the case, and whether you group it in 3 or 5, whatever you want to do, I think the fact that he is bridge guy, I mean, that's a huge pillar.
That was his alibi.
He puts himself there. There's nobody else on the trail. He's the guy on the video. The fact that the bullet is found at the crime scene between the 2 girls, and so it ties him to the crime scene. And that's all we had in the probable cause, and I believe when we filed the probable cause, that was enough There's nobody else on the trail. He's tied to the crime scene. He's the last one to see the girls. He's the guy. The confessions were something we gathered at the end, and I think those just added to what we had.
And I want to get in one more question. Thank you. Or two
this
more,
is
maybe.
be a popular one. I may have a follow-up, depending on your answer.
Sure.
In your years of experience in law enforcement and practicing law, criminal law, how many pretrial detainees, how many innocent, under the presumption of innocence, pretrial detainees get held in a state prison as opposed to a county jail?
More than you think. If they have severe medical issues, if they're particularly troublesome in our little jail. Again, I'm in a very rural community, so my answer may be different than someone, say, in Denver or Indianapolis. But our jail was very, very small with very, very limited resources. And so if someone is a high maintenance prisoner, where they have medical issues, Richard Allen is a high risk, it is not uncommon for us to move them to the DOC. And so it's not, it's not every person, but it's not uncommon either in the world that I live in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't solitary confinement.
Go ahead. Go ahead. He had an iPad.
Hi, congratulations on the verdict. I currently work for a federal court, and handle 2254s and 2255s, so I assume you know what direction my question's going. It's three parts. Number one, was counsel appointed or retained in this case? Number two, have any post-trial motions been filed or a notice of appeal? And number three, do you anticipate ineffective counsel being raised in a 2254?
You want me to take that one?
No.
And why did he, I have one, why is he in Oklahoma? Do you know why they moved him?
So the counsel were appointed. Two public defenders were appointed to him.
Yeah.
And so we're running out of time, but they were removed at one point. And they took the case to the Supreme Court of Indiana to be put back on. They were removed because crime scene photos were leaked from their office. And that was a breach, in my opinion, of the gag order and of the discovery protection order. They were removed. They went to the Supreme Court of Indiana. The Supreme Court of Indiana put them back on as public defenders. So the fact that the Supreme Court of Indiana put them back on, I think that negates their argument for ineffective assistance of counsel. Now, will the appellate counsel are different than the trial counsel, and that's not uncommon in Indiana. Will the appellate counsel bring that up? I don't know. There is an appeal pending. They've asked for extensions to file the appeal brief, and they just got another extension, I believe. And so the appeal brief has not been filed, so we don't know what arguments they're going to make in the appeal. But that's kind of the short answer.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm actually here from Fort Wayne, Indiana, so obviously this was on my news constantly.
Sure.
And I just, as true crime consumers and people who are advocates for these victims and stuff, what advice would you give to civilians and loved ones who want fast answers, fast resolution, but may not fully understand the complexities and the difficulty of investigating and getting the right answer?
You want? I think I wasn't being facetious in the press conference when I said there's no dumb tips, but there is bad tips. If you call in and say, "Hey, my buddy's friend I met last week did it, but I don't have his name, I don't have his number, I can't tell you what he looks like," that's a bad tip, right? That gives us nothing to go on.
And so the Sasquatch is under the bridge.
Well, that too, yeah. So, there's bad tips like that, but I think my advice to the general public would be, if you have information, give as much information as you can. The last thing you want to do is hurt the investigation by doing your own investigation. And so my tip would be, if you have information, you want to hand that over to law enforcement and give them as much as you can. I understand wanting fast answers, but unfortunately, I think that's more of the CSI effect culture that we're in. Sometimes things just don't happen as quickly as we'd like.
Well, I do want to end with thanking the CrimeCon community. I know how much you mean to the families and to law enforcement here, and how you're always, we prepare for the worst with the questions, but I knew the CrimeCon community is always so empathetic and loving, and I appreciate it. And thank you.